Good morning, Genesis. How are you guys doing today? We're going to raise our hands in worship. Hello, everyone watching at home. Get off your couch and sing with us. It's going to be fun. Let's sing Sometimes You Gotta Dance. Sometimes you gotta dance through the darkness, sing through the fire, praise when it don't make sense. Sometimes you gotta stand down the giant, worship from the lion's den. Sometimes you gotta shout from the mountain, louder in the valley, trusting that he's gonna get you there. Sometimes you gotta welcome the wonder, wait for the answer, worship with your hands in the air. I'll praise you anywhere.
because you make a way in every situation. That is what you do, and we praise you for it this morning.
Genesis Church, good morning. Why don't y'all have a seat? But before you do that, move in a little bit for our latecomers that are coming in. Save a little space on the end for them. We are so happy that you are here with us this morning. Those of you here in house, those of you watching online, good morning. Give a round of applause to those watching online, will you? We're so happy that you couldn't make it in here today. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. These are just jokes. Couple of things to celebrate with you this morning. The first thing that we want to celebrate is just how absolutely incredible people responded to our request. Like we asked, you see a little bit more room in here today, and that's because we asked folks if they were willing and able to step in and attend the 8:15 service to make room for 9:30 and 11 o'clock. And as you can see, that worked really well. And I can't tell you how happy we are, because it feels really good to preach to more than 10 people for the first service of the day. And so So it has been incredible. So we want to remind you that there's still space at the 8:15 service. So consider it. If you want to step in and come in a little early, start your day, we're here. So you might as well be here too with us, all right? And the second thing we want to talk about is our summer impact offering. It has been absolutely incredible. We have been able, because of your generosity, to send students to our Rush Camp through scholarships. We've been able to launch Ignite, which was absolutely incredible. How many of you volunteered and or had children in our Ignite camp this summer? All right? That's it? Well, it seemed like more. Well, it was our largest ever, largest volunteer base, largest student involvement ever. And it was a great day. And that was free to the community. But of course, money had to come from somewhere. And it came from us and it came from you. So we're so grateful for that. But we're not done yet. We're about $6,000 away from our summer impact offering goal, okay? And this is the last week to participate in that. But I want you to let you know what our final focus is for. In October, we're going to be sending a team out to Brazil. Now, we've been heading to Brazil, and we've been serving with the same church, Igreja Batista Parque das Flores, since 2012. And we've participated in helping with the capoeira program, jiu-jitsu, ballet. A lot of those programs we implemented and we continue to fund. But lately we're starting to realize, and we've learned, that they are busting at the seams. They are running out of space. There are things that are falling apart and just straight falling off. And if you've ever been, you know what the bathroom situation is like in Brazil. So there's a lot of work that needs to be put into this building because we want to continue to go and we want to make it as comfortable as possible, especially for our teams that are going as well. And so we are going to start the renovation project, helping the church there this October for the trip that's coming. And again, the money that you contribute is going to go directly towards that project. So we thank you in advance for giving and for continuing to give. We're so excited for what God is doing. And like Chad is fond of saying, we want to remind you that you don't give to a church, you give through a church. And the evidence of that is obvious, not just in what we say, but in what people come back and say that we do. And so rest assured that it is going to a great place, and we're so grateful for that. Well, for now, we want you to ready your hearts, and we want you to ready your minds for God's word as Pastor Tim takes the stage. Thank you very much.
Well, as PJ said, welcome back to Genesis Church. Welcome all those watching online, wherever you're watching from. We are diving right in today. So take your Bibles, take your pens. And what I want to do is I want to start where we're actually going to end today. So I'm going to show you kind of where we're going to end and back up, and that's where we're going to start, and then we're going to roll into this. And so if you're a first-time guest, welcome. This is Genesis Church, and we are in the way of the Messiah. It is a full year with Jesus, all of Jesus' teachings, his miracles, his death, burial, resurrection, and we are currently in the Sermon on the Mount. Here's a question I get asked a lot of times. There are a lot of people that claim that they believe in Jesus. There's a lot of people that claim they go to church. But there are many people that ask me, what does the life of a Jesus follower really mean? What does that really mean for me? I tell people I'm a Christian. I tell people I attend church. I tell people that I believe in Jesus and I believe in the God of the Bible. But what does that mean for me as a Jesus follower in my life? And I tell people, I want to show you some things in Scripture that I think you often miss. Because when we begin to follow Jesus, we say things like we surrender our life to him. And sometimes people go, well, what does that mean? And what does that look like? Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, he says, do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? You are not your own. You were bought with a price. So he says, listen, when you come to Jesus, you come to him because you realize God gave up his son for you. And in doing so, in redeeming you, that word redeem means you were bought back with a price. Jesus. And therefore, you are no longer your own. You belong to him. Paul will also say in the book of Romans, he says, thanks be to God that you who were once slaves of sin have become obedient from the heart. Listen to the language. To the standard of the teaching from which you were committed. So he says, you were once a slave to sin. Your heart was changed, and through the obedience of the teaching you're committed to, you've been set free from sin, having become slaves of righteousness. So he says, now let me tell you this. You were once a slave to sin. Jesus came, he set you free, but you are not free to do anything that you want. You are now a slave to righteousness, the goodness of God in your life. In essence, what the Bible does in answering the question, what does the life of a Jesus follower really mean, is that it tells you this. It's not your will, it's his will. It's not your way, it's his way. The Bible tells us there was an old you, and when you met Jesus and you gave your life to Jesus, there comes a new you. So therefore, in essence, as he says in the scriptures, we're not our own, we belong to him. So guess what that means? Your marriage belongs to him. Your family belongs to him. Your career belongs to him. Your relationships belong to him. Your finances, your resources, your talents belong to him. And as we read in the first verse, your body belongs to him. Jesus would say this about disciples who want to come follow him in Matthew chapter 16. If anyone would come after me, come follow me, let him do what? Deny himself. Take up his cross and follow me. For who would ever save his life will lose it. If you try to do it your way, your will, your desire, you will lose what he has to offer you. But those who lose their life, give it up for his sake, will find it. So there's a common thread throughout the scriptures that when you belong to Jesus and you come to Jesus and you really find Jesus and you surrender to Jesus, you're not your own. You're not a slave to sin, but you're a slave to righteousness, and you deny yourself so that you can have all that God intended for you. Don't chase after what you just want. As we open up today's passage in the scriptures and the Sermon on the Mount, we're going to look at this in a deeper way and understanding. The Sermon on the Mount is the greatest sermon ever preached, ever told. And what we're learning as followers of Jesus is that there's a discipleship goal. The goal is to move from believing to becoming. We want you to believe, but we want you to become like Jesus. We want you to say and tell people you trust in Jesus, but we also want you to live like Jesus. And that's what the Sermon on the Mount does for all of us. So we've looked at the Beatitudes, the blessings. Jesus saying, listen, I didn't come to abolish the law. I came to fulfill it. And then last week, Chad talked about anger in our lives. Now, right up front, let me just kind of get you caught up to speed so that you understand what's about to happen today. Jesus is a real person in a real place at a real time. He's a teacher. He's known as a rabbi in biblical times. And what a good teacher would do is they would come along and they would grab the scriptures that the disciples knew, the Old Testament, and they would say this, you have heard it said. You know this. You've read this. You've studied this. You've memorized this. You know the laws and the commandments of God say this. And as a teacher, as a rabbi, I'm going to interpret it for you. So they would say, you have heard it say blank, but I tell you this. Now what they're not doing is saying, what I just told you goes away. In essence, it's awesome because what they're doing is saying this. You've heard it say, do not commit murder. But let's talk about anger so that we can talk about what gets us to murder. And a good teacher would do this. Jesus is a phenomenal teacher. Phenomenal. At the end of this whole sermon, it will say this in Matthew chapter 7, that the crowd was astonished at his teaching because he taught as one who had authority, meaning he had the authority to interpret the scriptures in a way they had never thought of them before. Like my desire for you is that when we teach things, you go, man, I just didn't see that and I didn't understand that. But now that I do, it is changing so much about how I take that and I use that in my life. Jesus is doing no different. You heard it say this, but let's talk about this. Let me really explain it to you. In essence, he's going, let me take what's in your head and let me move it to your heart. what he's doing is saying, listen, I don't want you just to know of me. I want you to know me. As we are saying, we don't want you just to believe, we want you to become. Now, last week and this week and next week and the following week, I'm just going to tell you this right up front. Jesus is going to speak to some of the most important areas of our life. The most important areas of our life. And some of these areas are very sensitive parts of our lives. Depending on our past, depending on our choices, depending on where we currently are, there are some people that what we're going to talk about, because Jesus taught us about it, it's a very sensitive area. But I love this. Dallas Willard, one of my favorite authors and scholars, anything that he writes, you should read, says this: I think a mature Christian is someone who's very difficult to offend. Like, that's the goal, right? The goal is to want to become like Jesus so much that when we talk about areas of life, even the sensitive ones that you may get a little defensive about, you become less and less easy to offend. But that's not the current state of the church. I've been a pastor my whole life. My dad's a pastor. My grandfather's a pastor. I know people leave churches and church hop and church shop because they don't like it when the pastor talks about something that offends them. And so Dallas Willard says, listen, let's grow in our faith that when Jesus and the Bible talk about some sensitive areas of our lives, we're actually willing to receive it, learn from it, and change with it. Take your Bibles, Matthew chapter 5. You have heard it said, do not commit adultery. This is what Jesus was bringing to them. Last week, he brought them the 5th commandment out of the 10 commandments. You shall not commit murder. Now he moves to the 6th commandment. You shall not commit adultery. So you have heard it said in the commandments of God, do not commit adultery. But I tell you this: everyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Jesus is bringing his followers in for a moment, bringing them at his feet, and he's saying, listen, I want to move from morality to motive, as Chad said last week. The moral law and the commandments still in place. I didn't come to abolish that. But I want to talk about the motive inside of you that gets you to the place where you break these commandments. And so we're here this morning because Jesus taught it to talk to you about lust. Welcome to Genesis Church. That's what you wanted to come to church for, right? And that's what everybody's like, oh my, especially if you're new. Where did I come and what's going to happen in this church service? Listen to me. I understand lust is a very strong word. It's a very strong word because it is associated with desiring something you really want or deeply crave. And the biblical terminology, this is what lust means. It is looking with a desire to create or take an action. That is the essence of what lust looks like in the scriptures. Now, when we get to this teaching, and I say the word lust, I've been in church long enough as a student, like many of them that are in here in this service, in college, as a young adult, and even today. I know what happens when I say we're going to talk about lust. The room divides itself. Because all the women in the room go, this is your topic for you to deal with, to all the men. That's how it goes. Little elbows are thrown, kind of nudging and pointing, because we see this issue as a man issue. But I ask you, when's the first appearance of lust in the scriptures? And so as I was thinking about this past week, I was like, where do we find lust in the scriptures when it first appears and shows up? And so I was thinking that maybe it's when God made Adam and Eve, right? Because we see the wiring of a man in the moment. Adam's in the garden. He's got nothing but animals and a garden around him. God puts him to sleep. Out of his rib, he forms Eve. And it says, when he woke up from his slumber, we know they were naked. So what's his first words? Whoa, man. Yeah, that's her title. Got it. She'll be called woman. This is how men are wired. We know this. We're not denying this. We are leaning into this morning because it's going to take us somewhere. But where's the first place of lust? That's not it. You know the first place of lust in the scriptures is? Genesis chapter 3. And when she, the woman, saw that it was pleasing to the eye, she took the fruit. See, we can lust for power, and we can lust with greed for money. But in this instance, we'll keep it where it is in context. Jesus specifically attaches it to sex, to adultery. Now, when we look into this, I will tell you, study now shows that lust between women and men is really no different in their desires. While it connects them to certain things, men, lust is more about sex, and for women, it's more about the connection before sex. Both of them struggle with this issue. Everybody in this room here today, no matter how old you are, struggles with this issue. It is the reason it's in the scriptures, and we're not afraid to teach about it here. Because if it should be teached anywhere, it should be done in the church with the people of God. And so when you come to this, and I come to this, I'm a guy, so I remember as a student, and even now, I go, listen, when I read this passage, with all the images around us in society and culture, all the things we're flooded with on TV and in social media, and all the ads and all the billboards and all the stores, this is nearly impossible to live out. Like, there is just absolutely no way we can actually walk this out in any reality. It's near impossible because of the culture around us. That's why we have to understand what Jesus is talking about. When Jesus is talking about lust, he is not condemning looking, he's condemning lusting. Now, hold on just a second, because I know some of you just went. And some of you are going to twist my words and use them later and get yourself in a whole lot of trouble. Okay? Jesus is not speaking against a casual glance or an involuntary thought. Jesus is speaking against and condemning looking with a desire that leads to action. And there's a difference. There are times in our life, there are moments where we're in places, there are things sometimes we're doing, and something just happens, and you didn't take yourself there, and you didn't try to go there, and you saw something, and you back up and you go, oh my gosh. You start hyperventilating. I'm the worst sinner to ever exist on the planet. I can never follow Jesus and do this right. Jesus says, listen, I'm talking about lust. And lust is looking with a desire to create or take action in something. Last week, Chad, when he was preaching about anger, he said, welcome the fence if I haven't talked about it yet, halfway through his message. And the reason he did that is because that's what we're talking about in the scriptures. We're talking about Jesus using a very Jewish way of teaching. In their day, in their time, what he's doing is this. He's saying, listen, you heard don't commit murder, but I'm going to put a fence in place. I'm going to put a boundary, and I'm going to tell you when anger creeps in, if you don't check it at that fence line, at that boundary line, it can lead you and could lead you to something like murder. And so the fence and the boundary line become important. I want to show you the most famous fence in television history. Ready? And I'm going to date myself. The most famous fence in television history is this one right here. And for those of you that have no idea what this is, it's an awesome show called Home Improvement, where all the men in the audience want to go every time they watch it. And this is not Santa Claus. This is Tim Allen. And in every episode of this show, at some point, he would leave his house and he would go to his backyard to the fence. And on the other side of the fence was a guy named Wilson. We never got to see his face. You only got to see his eyes. Chad's been joking around all morning long that he was just going to hide behind the fence and just rise up at this moment and just freak everybody out. But what Tim Allen would do is this. If he faced a situation in his marriage, in his home, in his workplace that he was struggling with, he would go out to the fence to Wilson, and he would share with him what he's struggling with. And Wilson would give him advice, would give him some wisdom, and then he would take that and he would go back in to his wife, to his kids, to his workplace, and he would use it. He knew the fence in his life was a place that he could visibly see and go, that would remind him and would lead him in the opposite direction. Hey, I know you want to go down this path. I know you want to do this thing, but listen, just come here and get what you need and go in the right direction. Go back to where you need to be to handle this the right way. In essence, that's what Jesus is doing with the scriptures. Back in biblical times, they didn't have fences like this. As a matter of fact, what they typically did was they set up what's called boundary stones. They would take big stones and they would lay them and they would create a border across their property, their territory, their kingdom. Sometimes they would use some wood to create some type of fence. And whenever someone was coming from a different place, a different town, a different kingdom, and they came through a field and they found the boundary stones or they found whatever fence that was created, they knew, I don't cross this boundary stone or this fence without realizing I am in someone else's territory and I probably don't belong there. No different than keeping things out of your own backyard with a fence. Your fence usually, typically sits a pretty good distance away from your house. And the reality is, if something or someone comes over my fence into my backyard, they're still not at my house yet. And so I have time to protect myself or handle or whatever it is that has gotten in to take care of it. And so biblically speaking, this is what a fence and a stone was, a boundary stone. It was putting something in place to allow you to see it, to go, if I go past this place, I could end up in a place I don't want to be. So when Jesus starts talking about adultery and lust, we found out in condemning lust, Jesus is setting a fence to keep you from walking into a land, an area that doesn't belong to you. He says, let's back up and let's talk about lust for a moment. Because if we can talk about that and you can identify that and you can see the problem in that, that's going to keep you from going to full destruction with adultery in your marriage. When I was in Germany just about 2 years ago with Chad, and we were with our pastor partner over there in the church, we went all around Germany and we went to some beautiful places and saw some castles. And then I told him, I said, listen, one of the few remaining concentration camps in the world is in this space. Can we get to it? And so we drove a few hours and we got to go to one of those. And it was surreal and it was heartbreaking, and the pictures and the images and the buildings and the stories are as horrific as you could ever think they could be. And as we were walking down the path one day, on that day, to the right of me, you see the gravel that's in this picture. And then I saw this sign called the neutral zone. And so I said, well, what's that about? What's that mean? And so they began to tell us on our tour guide that they had a neutral zone with barbed wire before the wall that you would try to scale to escape. And so any of the prisoners that they had in this camp knew that if I enter the neutral zone, if I try to get over that barbed wire before I even scale the wall, they're going to shoot me dead right here in this spot. The moment I get to the fence, just with the intent of getting over the wall, they are going to take my life and they are going to shoot me from the tower. They were telling these prisoners, there's a danger zone you don't enter. And if you do, there's going to come destruction. Jesus is teaching his disciples that lust is the danger zone before adultery. So let's put up fences to keep us as far from the danger zone, because that will lead us to a destructive zone. Let me tell you something. Satan's job, listen to me, is to do what? Kill, steal, and destroy. And I say that and you go, yeah, okay. Because some of you haven't recognized you're walking in a danger zone right now. And when it comes to the area of lust, guess how it works? He says, I'm going to steal from you first. Because when you lust, you desire something you don't have, and you begin to desire it in such a way that you want to, or you have begun to take action to get it. And he says, in doing so, in giving into it, I'm going to begin to steal from you. You're going to begin to steal from your relationship, from your marriage, from the way that God wants you to live. I'm going to do all those things. And then when it gets to that place, I know that you're going to kind of suppress it and you're going to keep it as far down as you can, and you're going to try to act like it's not a problem because you don't think you're in the danger zone, but that's where I can take the kill shot. And once I take the kill shot, I'm going to destroy everything in your home. and everything about your life. And so he works in subtle ways, but he's always working towards a destructive way. This morning, when it comes to boundary stones and fences in the area of lust, I want to give you 3 things the scriptures teach us about. The first boundary stone, a fence in your life when it comes to lust should be this: guard your eyes. I believe with all my heart, listen to me, I believe with all my heart, the greatest threat to our generation is the sexual movement around us. In media, social media, movie, TVs, music, and more. It is the greatest threat. It is bringing the most destruction to our culture and our generation than anything else. The enemy knows what he's doing and how he's working. Some of you are blind to it. Some of you are naive to it. Some of you are ignorant to it. Some of you have awakened to it. I could tell you that currently 10% of all websites you have visited have some type of sexual content or pornographic material on them. I could tell you statistically that 70% of men and 40% of women have viewed pornography in the last month. I could tell you the porn industry is set to match that of NCAA sports, bringing in a revenue of over $1 billion this year. I could tell you that during the pandemic, that OnlyFans, the website, grew 615% from 13 million users to 85 million users. That's 2/3 the size of the United States. Their income last year was more than all social media influencers combined at $5.5 billion. I could read statistic and study after statistic and study, and guess what? You don't care. You're numb to it. It doesn't bother you. It actually means very little. Because in the moment, you don't think you or your kids are in a danger zone. The enemy told Eve, or showed Eve, something pleasing to the eye. And he knew that with that moment of lust, he could get her to take action in something she shouldn't have. When we started this church early on, there was a man in the church that came to me and he said, listen, Pastor Tim, I've got a porn addiction that has started. Can we sit down and we can talk about this? And so I met with him and we went out to lunch and I asked him some questions. I said, how did it begin? Where is it being done? You know, let's identify these things. And he said, well, I can't do it at home. I don't want to get caught there. He said, I'm not supposed to do it at work. If I get caught there, they'll fire me. He said, so I've found a way where you can just Google and I just see the thumbnails, but I don't click them. And when he did this, I saw it for what it was. Something this small was about to bring the greatest destruction his life would ever see. He said, I just look at the thumbnails and I don't even click them. And so we met and we worked and we prayed, but he wasn't wanting to change. He was just wanting to fix the problems that he was creating. And the thumbnails grew into websites, which led to movies, which led to eventually an all-out affair. He lost his job. He lost his wife. He lost his children. He lost his home. He lost everything. The enemy is coming to steal, kill, and destroy you. And Jesus says, you better pay attention to lust. You better stop ignoring it. You better stop acting like it's not a big issue, and you better start guarding your eyes. As a matter of fact, in verse 29, he says it this way: if your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. For it's better that you lose one member of your body than your whole body be thrown into hell. Now, this is a very rabbinic way of teaching. Yes, he's over-exaggerating, because some of you this morning are like, wait a second, what's about to happen when I leave this place, right? But he's saying, listen, I'd rather you gouge out your eye and walk around with only one good eye than have two good eyes and be looking at the wrong thing. He says, we're really talking about who you are, because I'd rather your eye be damaged than your whole body be taken into destruction, because you didn't think you were in a danger zone and you didn't see it all around you. Now listen, whenever I sit with people and we talk through this and we talk about this in their life, I tell them, listen, there's 3 things we need to really identify. First and foremost is this: there are things you can't help see. You haven't sinned because you saw something you couldn't help see. I want you to hear me clearly on that. Okay? There are moments you walk somewhere and something pops up. There are moments you're watching TV and an ad or something for a movie pops up and you're like, oh my gosh, what did I just see, right? And in a moment you're like, you're scrolling and you're looking at sports schedules and something pops up. You couldn't help but see that. That's not the problem. That's the world coming at you, and that's the enemy doing what he can to get at you. But you need to pay attention to, first and foremost, the things you shouldn't see. The amount of people that I have conversations with about the things they watch, the movies they see, the TV shows they're into. And then I'll hear this. Well, it's got a lot of stuff in it. But if you can get past that, it's good. Or the amount of times I find out and discover, like, this movie's not really appropriate to watch and see. And the amount of people that lose their minds because someone else has seen it. And they can't be the only one in the room that hasn't seen it. And so I've seen this one and this one and this one. And I know that one got a little bit sketchier. But I mean, my life would be over if I didn't get to watch that like everybody else. There are things you shouldn't see. And there are things you choose to see. I know this shouldn't be on my computer, and this shouldn't be on my phone, and I shouldn't be watching this and going to this place and seeing this. I'm going to do it anyways. Jesus says, pay attention to the danger zone. Where's your boundary stone and your fence? Because it's going to take you to places you don't want to go. It's going to lead you to do things you don't want to do. Real quick, and we'll talk, listen to me. Tomorrow on the podcast, we're live at 11:30 or at 10:30ish on Instagram, and then we're on Spotify and iTunes and YouTube this week. We have a podcast we record after every Sunday sermon. I'm going to talk a lot about some of the practical things in all of this, because I realize there's some of you have no idea what to do with this sin in your own life that we're addressing today. I know there are some of you that it's in your marriage and you don't know what to do with this. And I know that there's some of you that are parents and you don't know what to do with this as a parent. And there are students that are struggling with this because the world's coming at you. Here's just a few quick things I want to throw on the screen real quick. Fences for your home. There are app blockers for your phone and your computer. Maybe you didn't know it. Maybe you just don't want to do it, but that's maybe part of the problem. TV parental settings that some of you don't use when you hand your kids things. Can I just tell you something? I can't believe we do this. We give this to kids. Some of you are so naive. You got little kids, and wherever they go, you just throw a tablet to them. And the older they get, listen, I have kids. I've got older kids. I've got one in middle school, and I know they've come to me. Hey, I clicked this and this happened. I clicked that. I didn't mean to, but I clicked it. Because you hand them off. Like I have books in every room. People are like, what does that mean? I literally have Christian books everywhere in every room in my house, because there are moments where I go, I could choose to do this or I could pick up this. And I want to make myself choose. My wife and I and our staff, we have rules and regulations about being with the opposite sex. It doesn't mean we've never ended up in a space with the opposite sex, but when we do, we quickly rearrange that setting and do what we can to where we're not alone so that nothing can take place. My screen time is limited from 9 to 5, so if you have my account and we're connected some way, I'm blocked out of social media from 9 to 5 every single day. I do not want it to rule my life, and I do not want it to interrupt my workday. We filter what we watch, we filter what we listen to, we filter what we post in my home, and yes, we filter what we wear. I have a daughter who graduates college in December, and I have a daughter who just went into middle school, 6th grade, who thinks she's in college. I know this battle. I live this battle. And I know some of you right now, you're sensitive because you're not spiritually seeing it, and you go, oh, here we go. Pastor Tim's letting my mom and dad know I shouldn't be wearing these shorts right now. Listen, we're talking about lust. And when you begin to see how destructive it is, you begin to take responsibility in your own life and possibly for other people around you. Guard your eyes. Secondly is this, guard your heart. Listen to me. Over 40% of music consumed by this generation is about sex. Recently studied, 9 out of the top 10 Billboard charted songs were all about sex. In the last few years, 80% of the highest grossing movies that have been watched and consumed have had sexual content in them. It's everywhere. It's a disease that is flowing through our society. And the enemy's using it to pull as many of us in as he possibly can. But listen what Solomon, the son of King David, who we'll talk about in just a moment, said. He said, guard your heart, for everything else flows from it. Guard your eyes, but guard your heart. Why? Because everything else flows from it. Why is this happening in my life? Why am I going through this? Why is this transpired? Sometimes you need to ask yourself, did I guard my heart? Because everything I do will flow from my heart. It's the reason why Jesus is going, listen, you have heard it said, and this commandment is in your head, but I'm going to tell you this because I want it to move from your head to your heart so that it takes root and it changes you and you begin to live like a follower of Jesus. But it's got to start inside first. So when you start wandering and what you see, you recognize I'm in a danger zone. When you begin to create habits and desires that take you to places and to people and in circumstances that you shouldn't be in, that's a danger zone. If you start longing for something other than what you currently have, you're in a danger zone. And the enemy knows it, and he's trying to get you there. But I would tell you today, listen to me, there can be no life change without a heart change. This room all day long has been filled with good people, with good intentions to change. You don't know how many people, when it comes to this issue, that I've had to counsel and sit with. And I hear them, I'm praying, God, take this away. I want God to take this away. I've got all these intentions because I know what this is doing in my life. There's so much shame. There's so much guilt. There's so much darkness and all this lust that I'm caught up in. You can have a good intention. But until you're really broken and you come to Jesus, you will never find freedom. This is something you cannot get out of on your own. And there are far too many of you that think that you can hide with it, you can conceal it, no one has to know about it, and eventually you will break yourself free, and that is a lie from the enemy himself. So the scriptures want you to know, guard your heart. Only Jesus can do this. That's why Jesus is telling you, listen, we can talk about adultery. It's going to ruin your life and ruin your home. But I'm going to back you up and go, let's talk about boundary stones and fences so you don't get there. Here's the problem in our life. We don't want boundary stones and we don't want fences. We don't want any of that stuff. You know what we want? This is what I hear. Pastor, where's the line before I cross it? So just draw the line in the sand because I want to get as close as I can to it. I'm not over the line. I haven't sinned yet. I haven't done that, but I'm playing in all this area right here, as close as I can get to this line. I have not crossed it, so I haven't broken a commandment of God, but I'm playing in the danger zone. And Jesus says, let's go build a fence. Let's put some space between you and that line so that when you start at the fence, you recognize I'm getting in a danger zone right now, a place I'm not supposed to be because I don't want you crossing that line either. And when we grow in Jesus, we begin to see this differently than the world around us. Guard your eyes, guard your heart, and the last thing is this, guard your holiness. There's some of you right now that there is so much shame and guilt. Even when I said the word lust this morning, first and foremost, everything inside of you just rose up and just cringed. No one knows. No one has a clue what I'm doing and what I'm fighting against. And the reason that all that happened inside of you is because the enemy knows if I can keep you trapped in your guilt and shame, you'll never seek what you need to seek to fix this. Why do you think that people who watch pornography do it somewhere where no one else is looking and can see them? Why do you think strip clubs have no windows on them so you can't see what's happening inside of them? He knows that if he can keep you in a dark, hidden place, no one else can find out what's going on. And what you will do is this. You will begin to say, listen, I really want to follow Jesus with everything that I got, but I am so messed up in this. I can never, ever guard my holiness because I can't be holy. Holiness is not perfection. Holiness is striving to follow Jesus and let him work in us to perfection. Revealed to us, that doesn't belong in you. I didn't intend for you to live life that way. Hey, that anger, let's address that now before it leads to something else. Hey, that lust problem you got, let's address that right now before it leads to something else. That is what the holiness of God is doing in us. And I imagine, I can't say for sure, that the disciples sitting around Jesus, listening to us say this, would have been thinking, where have I seen this work and where have I seen this not work? Because that's what we do. Immediately in this space, some of you are going, I know somebody who needs this. I know someone, this ruined their life. And we start doing that. How would they have done that? And I think maybe they would have thought of the greatest king in all of Israel, King David. And why would they have thought that? Because everything Jesus is teaching about in this moment is what happened in the life of King David. King David was known as a man after God's own heart. They looked at a bunch of kings and they looked like they were the right ones. And God said, I'm not looking at the outward expression. I'm looking at the heart. And that man has what I want to be the king of my people. But there's a moment in David's life where everything went crumbling down. And the story tells us that he walked out to the palace window one day and he looked out the window and down on the rooftop he saw a woman bathing. I got to think for a moment that he couldn't help but see that. Maybe he didn't go to the window thinking that was going to be there. Maybe he wanted to see the sun and the birds and just over his city. But when he looked, there she was, bathing on a rooftop. And the word used there that he looked is the same word with the same connotations as lust. That he looked with a longing look, meaning he gazed and gazed and gazed until that gaze became a desire to create or act upon the desire. And that casual glance that turned into an elongated look that fed his desire, that led to action, would lead him to an affair. And it wouldn't just be an affair, he would impregnate the woman that he had an affair with. And that woman that he impregnated with his child was the wife of a friend of his, whom to cover it up, he would have killed. And all of a sudden, this snowball of destruction would show up in King David's life. The baby would die, sin would enter his home. One of his children would rape the other sibling. One child would come along and kill the other child. One child would rise up and create a coup against his father to get him off the throne. And one child would kill that child. And then the one who finally sat on the throne one day would gather so many wives to fill his sexual desires that he would turn away from worshiping the one true God fully. What started as lust ended in generations of destruction. Jesus says, let's talk with lust because this is where it takes you. Into places and into danger zones you were never supposed to be. David, the king of Israel, did not guard his holiness that day. Because your holiness is something you have to choose to do. At some point in time, I can pray with you. Pastors can come around you. Counselors can come alongside of you. But you also have to also decide now's the time. I was a youth pastor for 13 years. I remember a parent came to me towards the end of being a youth pastor before we started Genesis Church and said, Pastor Tim, my high school son has a porn addiction. Can you help him? I said, sure, let me meet with him. Let's talk. So I met with him, met with her. Once again asked, where's this happening? How's it happening? Where's this coming from? What's taking place? And he said, my mom has her work computer in the basement. He said, so when she goes to work, I go down there and I've figured out her little password. And when she goes to bed, I get up and I go down there. And so we began to work through a plan, some boundary stones, some fences to put in place in the home to help prevent this. Obviously, it's still a thing you have to desire in your own guarding of your eyes and your heart and your holiness. About a month and a half later, he comes back to me and says, Pastor Tim, can we talk? I said, yeah. He goes, it's worse than it's ever been before. I said, well, what's that? How's that? When I met with his mom, I said, listen, I'm going to give you some boundary stones in your home. First and foremost, take the computer out of the basement and stick it up in the family room or kitchen where everyone can see it. Secondly, I'm going to give you a program to put on your computer. You're going to have to log in 3 or 4 times to keep him blocked out so that he can't access it, so that he can't get on your computer. But in your house, we're going to block him out as much as we can. They're boundary stones and fences. A few weeks went by. She decided that it was more fun and comfortable to work in the basement, not in the kitchen or living room. So she moved the computer back to the basement. She then expressed to me, she said, listen, that program you gave me, I have to log in like 4 or 5 times, and it takes forever for my computer to boot up. So I just took it off. I know that as youth pastor, I was as respectful as I possibly could, but inside I looked straight her in the face and said, you're a fool. You're an absolute foolish mom. Because there's a few things that you have to do uncomfortably, like work upstairs or keep the program on your computer, and it takes a little longer to log in. You will erase all the boundary stones and fences for your son. Foolish. And there's some of us, that's just what we are right now. We're foolish. There are things that can be done we're not willing to do. There are things that should be done we don't want to do. And Jesus says, I'm telling you right now, don't commit adultery, but I'm going to tell you how you got there. And it started with lust. And some of you go, well, I know I'm in a danger zone, but I haven't crossed that line. I'll never cross that line. Just play with fire. You'll get burned eventually. Play with fire. You'll get burned eventually. Something will happen. Something will come up. Something will be shown and something will be seen. As we close today, let me go back where we started. 1 Corinthians chapter 6, Paul said this about what it means to follow Jesus. Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you? What he's telling you is this: when you come to Jesus and follow him, the Spirit of God now dwells in you. Wake up to the reality that wherever your body goes, the Spirit of God goes. Whatever you do, it's there with you. You're not hidden. You're not in secret. You're bringing it with you. And then he says, it's come from God. You are not your own. You don't get to decide what you want to do and how you do it when you say you belong to Jesus. Why? Because he bought you. He bought you back. He sacrificed his son Jesus for you. Not so that you could just get your Willy Wonka ticket into heaven and do whatever you want on earth. Listen to me. You're not your own. I want you to hear me clearly as the pastor of Genesis Church. In a world and an ideology that says my body, my right, that's not true for a follower of Jesus. It is not your body, your right. Your body and your right are surrendered to God. And they belong to him and him alone. Whenever you begin to say my, you are taking your life back to do what you want with it. Jesus says, you belong to me. So what do you do with that? He says, you're not your own. You were bought with a price. And then it says this, so glorify God where? In your body. With your body. Where your body goes. What your body does. So what you see does matter. What you watch, hear, listen to, the words you say, the places you go, it all matters. Because it's all an opportunity to glorify God where your body goes, or to give into the desires of self. And the scriptures are clear. You're not your own. You're bought with a price. So glorify God with your body. But I end with this, because here's the deal. This is, I took off last week. Chad spoke. Thank God we're a church of pastors, not a church with just a pastor. Because I knew this morning I needed time to pray and prepare, because I knew that this is a very real sin in many people's lives. And we can't have 3 services filled with people and people watching online. And some of you not go, listen, this thing right here, it's got me right now. And you may not have crossed that line yet, but it's got you in the danger zone. And this is your opportunity to realize you will never, ever get yourself out of the danger zone. Only Jesus can break you free from that. Only Jesus can set you free from that. David knew this. This is why David is a man after God's own heart. Because he messed up. And he did some things that did not honor God. But he's the only king, read and study, out of all the kings of Israel, that when he sinned and messed up, he knew to come back to God and God alone. In Psalm chapter 32, verse 5, he says, I acknowledged my sin to you, speaking to God in prayer, and I did not cover it. How many of us are trying to cover it right now? Because we're so ashamed if we admit this is a struggle and we're trapped in it. Oh man, I don't know what's going to happen next. I said, I'll confess my transgressions, my sins to the Lord. And what did God do? You forgave the iniquity of my sin. He said, I came back to you because I knew. Now let me be very clear. Some of you, you play the wrong game with God. Let me play with sin. Let me ask for forgiveness. Let me play with sin. Let me ask for forgiveness. Let me play with sin. Let me ask. That's not seeking forgiveness. So I came. I cried out. I didn't cover any of it. I admitted it all, and I surrendered it to you. And when I surrendered it to you, you forgave me. You set me free of it. Only Jesus can do that. This morning, as we close out, I want to invite you to bow your head and close your eyes, and I want you to stay with me. Listen to what I'm telling you right now. I just don't want you to be distracted. We're about to sing a song I grew up in church singing. It's called The Old Rugged Cross. And the words say there's room at the cross for you. Because there's some of you, or you have a spouse, or you have a child that is dealing with this sin, and the shame and the guilt and the darkness is so overwhelming, you don't think God wants you, God can use you, God can free you. And I want you to know there's room at the cross for you. Jesus' invitation is always open for you to come. Don't cover your sin. Confess your sin. Confess your sin so he can forgive you of your sin. And Jesus wants you to hear this. Listen, put the boundary stone and the fence in place. When lust shows up, that looking with a desire to create an action or take an action. Because if you play in that zone, it's going to take you to destructive paths. And so if you're going to follow me, let's set up as many boundary stones as possible. So we know that we're not entering areas we don't belong in. And we're becoming more aware of how to navigate this world. But you're going to have to guard your eyes, you're going to have to guard your heart, and you're going to have to guard your holiness for it to work. Father, today, Spirit of God, do what I have no power to do. Change hearts and minds. Change lives. Release the captive in this place today. Set the prisoner free. Let them realize that in their own strength and own might, they cannot do this, but only by your strength and your might. Let your truth be louder and stronger than the whispers and lies of the enemy right now. For those that think that they can sit and cover their sin in darkness and fix it, God, would you pull them into the light to come and confess it and to forgive it? God, let them know there's room at the cross, that you still want them. You can still use them. You're not done with them. There's an old them that needs to stay back there. There's a new them that you want to be seen. God, we are not our own. We are bought with a price, and we exist to glorify you in our bodies. May we wake up to that today. In your name I pray. Amen. I'm going to ask you to stand to your feet. I'm going to ask any pastor, elder, life group leader. I'm going to ask some of our high school, middle school volunteers, because there are a bunch of students in this place, if you would come down front. And as we sing this song, if you need prayer, do not leave this space today. Listen to me. I know this for a fact. There's some of you need prayer, and you will sit there in shame and guilt. We are not wanting to ever throw a stone at you. We are wanting to celebrate that only Jesus can set you free. And so don't let that ever stop you from doing what God needs to do in your life.
So I'll
Genesis Church. Between last week and this week, I'm sure some of you are going, what are we doing here? I feel like they talk about me. And that's good. We want you to be convicted. We want you to be conflicted. But more than importantly, we want you to know that you're not alone. Anger, lust, the things that are to come, they're very, very heavy things. And I think if most of us were honest with ourselves, we probably struggle to find out where the beginning point for some of these things in our lives began. But what we want you to know is you don't have to do this alone. Here at Genesis Church, we have been blessed to have a community of people who are qualified professionals to help you in areas of counseling, life coach, mentoring, mental health. And so as you're sitting through these services and you're feeling this tug, it's probably because the Holy Spirit is telling you that the time is now. You know, one of the old ideas of church is that we could just pray things away, right? And that all we need is Jesus. But Jesus places professionals and men and women in your lives who have a spiritual lean and bend towards their services. And that can help, and it will help. So if that's you, we want you to just hit that QR code, fill out that form, and we will be very strategic about finding the people that you need in your life to help you in those types of areas, all right? And so I know this is heavy and this is rough, so let's shake it off a little bit, all right? And I want to let you know that Kickoff Sunday is coming, September 8th. We're going to be launching our fall season. We've got a lot of different things happening, discipleship groups, lots of opportunities. Here, listen, folks, ladies and gentlemen, yes, we say we want you to rethink life the way God intended, right? But more importantly than that, we want there to be an action step in place for that. And moving from believing to becoming involves in action. And we want you to lean in because we're leaning in with you. And that's what that community is about. And that's what Genesis Church is about. So I want you to walk out these doors today. And for those of you who are feeling a little tug at your heart, I want you to know the Holy Spirit is telling you that the time is now. So take action. Grace and peace.